In 1958, a 27-year-old in Omaha bought a 5-bedroom house for $31,500. He still lives in it. His name is Warren Buffett, and his net worth is somewhere around $140 billion. You have heard that story used as proof that rich people are frugal. That is not what it proves, and Buffett himself has said so. In a shareholder letter, he called the house his third best investment ever, behind his 2 wedding rings. Then he added the part nobody quotes. He said he would have made far more money renting and putting the purchase price into stocks. He is right, and the math is not close. That house went from $31,500 to about $1.4 million, which is roughly 44 times his money over 68 years. That same $31,500 compounding at 10% a year would be over $20 million, so the house was not a great financial decision. He has told us that plainly. What makes this story worth telling is something he said in 1998, recalling the conversation with his wife. Buying the house, he said, would use up all his capital. It would be like a carpenter having his tools taken away. That is the sentence that matters. He did not see a house. He saw his tools leaving the building. And that is the actual habit underneath all of this. It has almost nothing to do with being cheap. Here is the thing that connects every old money behavior you have ever heard about. Old money and new money are not buying different things. They are buying different kinds of thing entirely. New money buys positions. Old money buys options. A position is something you occupy. A nicer car, a bigger house, a membership. It arrives, it looks like something, and it comes with a maintenance requirement. An option is something you could do. Money free to move and costs low enough to walk away from a job. A calendar that is not already spent. And here is why the title of this video is literally true rather than poetic. You can see a position. You cannot see an option. Positions have an appearance, which is most of the reason people buy them. Options have no appearance. So the freest person in the room looks exactly like the person with nothing. The wealth is not hidden. It is just made of something invisible. Let me make it visible, because nobody ever puts a number on this. Take 2 households, both earning $80,000 a year. Identical jobs, identical paychecks. The first has fixed costs of $40,000 a year, housing, cars, insurance, debt payments, subscriptions. That leaves $40,000 of what I will call optionality. The second has fixed costs of $75,000. Nicer house, newer cars, more of everything. That leaves $5,000, same income. One of them has 8 times the room to move. Now run that for 10 years at a 7% return. The first household ends up with about $553,000. The second ends up with about $69,000. But that comparison undersells it badly, and here's the part that almost nobody computes. Ask a different question. How long could each household stop working? The first one has $553,000 against a life that costs $40,000 a year. That is roughly 166 months of freedom. Just under 14 years. The second has $69,000 against a life that costs $75,000. That is about 11 months. 8 times the savings rate produce 15 times the freedom. Low fixed costs help you twice, and this is the mechanism old money actually runs on. They fill the tank faster and they empty it slower. Every dollar you never commit permanently both accumulates and lasts. My neighbor David is the clearest example of this, I know. He drives a 2014 Accord with a dent in the rear quarter panel that he has never bothered to fix. His house is ordinary. Nothing about him photographs. David could stop working tomorrow, not in a dramatic way, not with an announcement. He simply has enough months banked against a life that costs very little to run. Nobody on his street knows that. There's nothing to know from the outside. The car is the only financial statement anyone can see, and it says the opposite of the truth. I'm Tom. This channel is about real personal finance. The kind that actually works for normal people, not the kind that gets you to click a thumbnail. No motivational fluff or fantasy returns. We just discuss what the math actually does over time. If that's what you want, hit subscribe. Now let me give you the 12, grouped by what kind of option they protect. Some of these I have covered in depth elsewhere. I will move quickly through those and spend the time on the ones nobody talks about. The first group is about options in what you own. Habit 1. Buy things that pay you rather than things that display you. An index fund pays you. So does a rental property, and so does a business. A luxury watch pays you a feeling. once at purchase. Both are real. Only one of them is still working for you in year 20. Habit 2. Borrow only for things that pay the loan back. Old money borrows constantly. It borrows against equipment, property, inventory, anything where the asset produces more than the debt costs. The question is never whether you can afford the monthly payment. Almost anyone can afford almost any monthly payment. That is precisely how people end up with no options. The question is whether the thing you are borrowing for produces more than the borrowing costs. Habit 3. Hold for decades rather than quarters. Buffett bought Coca-Cola in 1988 and never sold. The research here is consistent and slightly humiliating. Investors who check their accounts least often tend to do better than those who check most often. Habit 4. Only unglamorous thing. Commercial cleaning, pest control, waste hauling, industrial maintenance. Boring industries have thin competition. Ambitious people want to build something more interesting. I did a whole video on this one, so I will leave it there. The second group is about options in what you spend, and this is where the real separation happens. Habit 5. Keep fixed costs permanently low, no matter how much you earn. We just did the math on this. Here's the part that makes it click. Every fixed cost you take on is not just money. It is a decision removed from your own future. A $600 monthly payment is not a $600 payment. It is a job you cannot leave for a lower paying one you would enjoy more. There is a business you now cannot start, and a bad year you cannot absorb without panic, and it works on your savings from both ends. 10 years of that $600 a month invested instead comes to about $99,000. Meanwhile, the payment raised your annual cost of living. So every $100,000 you do manage to save now covers 25 months of your life instead of 30. You paid twice for the same thing, and only one of those payments showed up on a statement. And there is a practical order to attacking these, because not all fixed costs are equally movable. Housing is the biggest and the hardest, but it is also the one where a single decision moves thousands a year permanently. Vehicles are second, and they are far more movable than people admit because the choice is remade every few years. Insurance is the one almost nobody shops. Same coverage, different carrier, often several $100s a year for one afternoon of work. Then there is the category people forget entirely, which is money supporting other adults. It is the most emotionally difficult fixed cost on anyone's list, and it is frequently the largest. Notice what all four have in common. They are boring, they are uncomfortable to examine, and every one of them repeats forever until somebody deliberately stops it. Habit 6. Insure against catastrophe, never against inconvenience. The rule here is precise, and once you have it, you will never buy another protection plan. If an event would materially change your financial life, insure it. Death while people depend on your income. Disability, a liability judgment, a serious medical event. If you could replace or repair the thing from your own resources without any real distress, do not insure it. A sharper way to draw the line is to ask whether the loss would change any decision you make this year. A broken dryer does not. Losing your income does. Self-insure the dryer, the phone screen, the laptop. Insurance is not for avoiding annoyance. It exists to stop one event from removing all your options at once. Everything else is a premium paid for a feeling. Habit 7. Keep your financial position private. This is not modesty, it is structural. When people can see your position, they attach expectations to it. You become the one who picks up the check, the one who gets asked for a loan, the one financial products get marketed to. The Millionaire Next Door research found American millionaires were more likely to drive a pickup truck than a luxury car. Most had lived in the same unremarkable neighborhood for 20 years. That was not an accident of taste. Invisibility keeps other people's claims off your options. The third group is about options in what you measure. Habit 8. Track your net worth, not your income. This one sounds too simple to matter, and it is the most commonly missed distinction in personal finance. Income is a flow. Net worth is a stock. The flow tells you how fast money arrives. The stock tells you how much is accumulated and stayed. Almost everybody manages by the flow. The salary, the raise, the monthly budget. Almost nobody sits down once a quarter and writes the stock number, which is how you get a person earning $120,000 with a negative net worth who feels successful, and a person earning $40,000 with $400,000 saved who feels behind. The second one has vastly more options, and neither of them knows it. There is a benchmark worth knowing here, from the same Millionaire Next Door research. They suggested your expected net worth is roughly your age multiplied by your pre-tax income divided by 10. At 45 earning $80,000, that comes to $360,000. Hitting it puts you at average for your income and age. Double it, and the research called you a prodigious accumulator. I am not offering that as a judgment. It is just a mirror. And it is a mirror pointed at the stock rather than the flow, which is the entire point of this habit. Most people have never calculated it once. 20 minutes with a calculator tells you more about your actual position than a year of watching your paycheck. Habit 9. Treat taxes as part of the design, not a bill that arrives later. New money earns, then finds out what the tax was. Old money decides where the earning happens first. None of the tools are exotic. Retirement account choice where an asset is held, when a gain is realized, when giving is timed. The difference is that one person asks the question before the decision and the other asks after the invoice. The fourth group is the one almost nobody covers, and it is about options that outlive you. Habit 10. Teach children through ownership, not through advice. This one changed how I think about the whole subject. Tell a child compound interest is powerful, and they understand it intellectually, then forget it. Now take a child who owns one share of something, watches a dividend land, and decides what happens to it. That child understands the mechanism in the only way that ever changes behavior. Their curriculum is not a lecture. It is a custodial account opened at 12, a small holding they actually own, and one a real decision a year that is genuinely theirs, including the decision to get it wrong. It costs almost nothing, and it is the difference between a family where financial capability transfers and one where it gets reinvented from scratch every generation. Think about why the lecture version fails. You are describing a slow process to somebody who has never watched one. Nothing to do with the cost, has almost nothing to do with the CAM scale, so compound growth is not a concept they can attach to anything real. Ownership fixes that because it gives them one thing that is genuinely theirs and genuinely slow. The dividend is small and slightly boring, which is exactly right. That is what the real thing feels like. And here's the part that surprises parents. The most useful outcome is often a loss. A child watches a small holding drop 30%, panics, and is allowed to just sit with it. That child learns something at 12 that most adults are still learning at 50. Habit 11. Build long relationships with people who know your whole picture. An advisor who has known your situation for 15 years sees things no app can. That relationship compounds the same way money does. Now I have to correct something you will see repeated everywhere on this topic. People claim this costs about the same as your streaming subscriptions. That is simply not true. A fee-only advisor typically runs around 1% of assets, or a few $1,000s flat. A tax professional and an estate attorney are each real money too. It is worth it for a lot of people, and for plenty of others, it is not yet. But anybody telling you it is free is selling you something. Habit 12. Invest in relationships the way you invest in assets. Credentials open a door once. Relationships keep opening doors for 30 years. The owner of a boring business with 3 decades of relationships in one industry has a moat that no better credentialed newcomer can cross quickly. Now let me be honest about the limits of this whole genre, because old money content attracts a lot of invented stories. I read a version of this list that features an anonymous Midwestern man who manufactures cup holders and is supposedly worth $40 million. No name, no company, no source. It is a very good story, and there is no way to check a word of it. I am not going to hand you an unverifiable anecdote and call it evidence. The Buffett numbers in this video are checkable. Millionaire Next Door is published research, and the optionality math is arithmetic you can run yourself. Second limit, and it matters. Some of these habits are much easier with a cushion. Telling someone with no savings to self-insure their appliances is bad advice, because for them a broken dryer genuinely is a catastrophe. The catastrophe line moves depending on what you have. Third, none of this requires you to live like a monk. Low fixed costs are not the same as low spending. Fixed costs are the commitments that repeat forever whether or not you want them to. A trip is not a fixed cost. A boat payment is. That distinction is the whole thing, and it is where most people go wrong when they try this. They cut the enjoyable variable spending, which is small and hurts, and they leave the commitments alone, which are large and invisible. Notice what is missing from all 12 of these. None of them requires unusual intelligence. None depends on getting into something early or knowing the right person or reading a market correctly. There's no timing in any of them. That is not a coincidence, and it is not modesty. It is the design. A habit that depends on being right is fragile because eventually you will be wrong. A habit that depends only on repetition survives being wrong. That is also why none of this makes a good story. Nothing on this list would hold a table's attention for 60 seconds, which is a large part of why it stays available to anybody willing to be that boring for that long. So here's what I would actually do this week. List every payment that repeats automatically whether or not you use the thing. Housing, vehicles, insurance, debt, subscriptions, memberships, and anything supporting another adult. Add them up. That is your fixed cost number. Then subtract it from your annual income. What is left is your optionality, in dollars this year. Then do the second calculation, the one that matters more. Take everything you have saved and divide it by your monthly fixed costs. That number is how many months you could stop earning entirely and nothing would change. Most people have never calculated it, and it is the single number that best describes how free you actually are, which is a different question from how wealthy you look, because that is the whole idea behind wealth nobody can see. It was never about hiding anything. It is that the thing being accumulated does not photograph. There is no version of a low fixed cost life that looks like anything from the outside. There is no car you can point at. The only evidence is a number of months, sitting quietly in the background that nobody else will ever notice. Except you, on the day you actually need them. Tell me in the comments what your month's number came out to and whether it was higher or lower than you expected. I read every comment and I reply to as many as I can. And if you want the next video, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.